2, 3, 4. Damn, that was good. That was good. We just finished up. We just wrapped up a little nice audio session.
Awesome. Hey, we're playing power chords for y'all today because we are here to introduce you to the power of totally serverless data engineering. My name, as always, is Yuri Grinstein. I'm a customer engineer here at Google. I'm joined by Jonathan Cham.
Hello.
Thanks for being here. And on the line with us, we have Michael Ernesto. Mike, say hi to everyone.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for letting us into your lives for a bit. And we are totally excited about doing this. So
you look like you're in a basement.
Yeah, well, you know, it's a new conference room, and I'm not so excited about the decorations, but hopefully the audio quality is okay.
Perfect.
Awesome. Well, we're really excited to talk about this topic. We're also excited to have our awesome new GCP Online Meetup.
Cheers. Cheers. There you go. All right. Michael, we got to get you one. Yeah.
There you go. Let's get the show on the road.
Yes.
So I'm actually really excited about this topic. It's a bit of a continuation of one of the sessions that we've done a little while ago, talking about streaming data processing, essentially using serverless infrastructure. So today we're going to be talking about data engineering and data analytics. So Michael, I'll let you take it away. Tell us why this is important and what problem we're trying to solve here.
Yeah, you bet. Well, really, I say totally serverless engineering here. It's kind of a definition first, then we'll talk about the problem here. It's, you know, the concept what we're going to try to show today is how you can kind of load, prepare, analyze, and look at data sets truly of any size without worrying about the infrastructure. That's really the problem we're trying to take care of. No need to design networks, you know, build or maintain images, select storage, worry about HA, capacity planning, backups. But you still can maintain, you know, really fine-grained controls, you know, detailed logging and tracking, and then have full access to the other services on the cloud. And just a point of clarification, you know, there's a lot of serverless in the news and the trade rags. This is not microservices. It's not functions, Lambda. We're not talking about refactoring the whole front end of your application and your DevOps workflow. This is serverless, on demand, you know, for potentially massive scale data workloads. So that's really it.
I think that's definitely a place where easily get confused, right? I think when we hear the word serverless computing in 2017, a lot of that has to do with you know, running code, right? So things like cloud functions in GCP, you know, Lambda in AWS. That's where people's minds go. So we should absolutely clarify that, and I'm glad that you did.
Yeah, and the inspiration for this, we were doing these onboardings where hundreds of people would come in and big bang one day would kind of go through a whole session on focused primarily on infrastructure as a service. And I started doing this session as a kind of a break to say, for the folks that don't really want to get into all that infrastructure, there's really an amazing amount of work you can do. And with one of the tools I want to highlight today, this service called DataPrep, you really have tremendous power in the hands to do really a lot of great capabilities. So I'm going to try to show it with a relatively simple use case. In fact, you want me to go ahead and move into what we're going to talk about right now?
Let's do it. People are anxious.
All right. So these are the 4 products I'm going to be talking about. Now, it's serverless. Obviously, there's servers down underneath, and the UIs are I've kind of got up at the top. So when you see them, you'll hopefully recognize them. BigQuery is you know, our data warehouse. It's on demand, seamless scaling to massive data sets. And the key here is that it separates the storage from the queries. And a lot of different users come in and make queries against this. So that's, you know, it's our standard data warehouse, but it's very powerful. And you can just make SQL queries against it. The thing I want to be kind of highlighting today is this another offering that's come out of private beta into public beta with great fanfare. It's DataPrep. And that's a way to intelligently clean and kind of look at the data before you move it into your ETL pipeline. There's a word called recipes we're going to talk a bit about. And DataPrep will work with both structured and unstructured data. You've heard you've probably heard that you can spend 70% of your time doing data cleaning and data prep. And this tool is specifically made for that use case. And it can be for presenting, you know, just regular standard reports. It can be used to feed data into an ML pipeline. But the key point here is this is an automated ETL build, and that will go into DataFlow, which is our tool, Apache Beam-based solution for doing the managed pipeline. But the fact that you can do this and access it with the visual interface, the real point here is that you can bring that power closer to the business analysts and the business users who are actually making the decision. So you don't have this cycle where the business analyst needs something, the data engineer goes off and tries to solve it. Is that the right rock? Not the right rock. Come back around and solve it. So it really can speed that up. And then the last thing is, of course, Data Studio, which is our interactive dashboard for reporting and sharing. So those are the products we're going to be looking at today, and it's going to be kind of a quick pass over each of them.
So I know you're highlighting DataPrep today. I have a customer. I mean, they love DataPrep because of the fact that you get the visualization aspect. As much as we like to automate everything, there's just sometimes that you want to look at the data, get some visualization, look at some charts, look at some bar graphs to see, is this data even what I'm like? Is this data the data I even want to automate and put into a data warehouse? So the fact that DataPrep can just quickly take in just like, lots of data and give you a quick insight into what that data is, I think was really helpful for my customer.
It is. It was hugely possible. When I presented this at these onboardings, we had hundreds of people there, and I had people track me down afterwards and say they've been struggling to try to get this capability, trying to get their data flows working because they didn't get the feedback from the business analysts, and this visualization was really a game changer for them. So what we're going to be looking at, again, it's not a complicated data set, but I try to keep it fairly simple. And this is using public data sets that are available to anybody listening here can go in and activate them in their own account. So this you could do at home. We're going to query against, we're going to do a join in BigQuery, a standard SQL join against two different tables. The stations database and the observations database. So we do the join in BigQuery, and obviously you could do a join in DataPrep, but we do it in BigQuery just because it's a kind of a familiar thing. And then I'll be doing the data cleaning in DataPrep because what you find out is the sensor data that the NOAA sensors are pulling in isn't clean. There's lots of null values. There's all sorts of other issues that could be going on, and we'll go through those. It's going to automatically fire off the DataFlow jobs. I write it back to BigQuery, but that's a different table and it's cleaned, and then present that. So this is really the the serverless data workflow that we're looking at here.
So Michael, while we're talking about DataFlow, obviously that's a topic near and dear to my heart. We covered an introduction to it in our Streaming 101 session, where we looked at how to create Apache Beam code to manage streaming event processing. Tell us about how DataPrep interacts with DataFlow. Does DataPrep control DataFlow, or are you going to show us Beam code in the same way that I did, or are we talking about something else here?
No, it's exactly the same thing. The difference is when you hit run job, DataPrep actually builds that flow. So it's using the same tools. In fact, it's billed as a DataFlow job with a slight markup for the DataPrep service. I think currently it's like 1.6 times the price for DataFlow. So it's a very small percentage markup, but it is exactly the same thing. And that's important because if you're using the logging and the tracking and the debugging, within DataFlow, and you're familiar with that, this is all very, very familiar. And I think the way to look at this as we go through, and I'll get into the demo next, is your data engineers, if they can hand some of this, this work to their business users, they can focus on the more complicated problems. That's really the way I've kind of come to look at this. But it does use exactly the same tools.
Okay. All right, let's get into the demo. I'm sure we'll have more questions once we start actually looking at this stuff.
Yeah, let me get the break out here. And all right, so just this is the the screen everyone's familiar with. If I use our platform, and I've just pinned the tools you're going to be looking up here at the top. So DataPrep, the DataFlow, BigQuery, and we are looking at public data sets. Again, these are all our kind of our standard tools and services. So starting with BigQuery, again, this is going to be the whirlwind tour. This is not a deep dive into BigQuery. But what I've done is use these public data sets, and these do not present immediately to customers, but they are available. You can request that they be added, and you have them available to use. So I'm pulling from two different data sets within the public data sets. And I'll show you a little
of what these data sets actually represent, just so that we have some context for what you're about to show us.
Oh, sure. The NOAA data is one is the stations, the actual physical locations of the stations. There's, I think, about 9,000 around the world. And then the other are by year readings. So you see this is 1929. And what I've actually done, because we had to say the least, an active weather, a weather season. So I've pulled the data for, and the join I'll show you, we pulled from this 2017. So these are the readings from the stations. There's a separate table at the station. They're just kind of showing a quick view on what BigQuery has. And this is public data, but if you'd have your own data sets in, you could see the same thing. So you get the schema, so you get some details about it. About what the scheme is, what the data types are. You get a little bit of detail on the data.
Looking at weather data as gathered by NOAA from 2017. And ultimately, what is the question that you're going to answer using this data?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There was a bit of a debate, in my household and with some friends about, was it more rain or wind? We had a hurricane that was obviously a massive rain event with Harvey, and then Irene came through and it was a massive wind event. So what I'm doing is really looking at the data sets, pulling the data, and then and plotting that, and then posting it to an interactive graph. So it's kind of looking at those two events correlated, but just using it as an example on how you can use this data.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yep, sure. And this is looking at the public data set. This is the kind of data we're looking at. So and I'll go through this now. Right off the bat, I think even before I get into DataPrep, you can see there's probably going to be some some strange things with this data, right? There's some 999s, which maybe that's what they're calling a null value. There's a bunch of zeros. So when we start to get into this, I'll show you what the cleaning looks like.
It's really interesting. I mean, I do deal a lot with machine learning customers, and part of what you're doing here is you're noticing that there's a lot of data, right? A lot of this is raw data, and before you use any of this, you need to clean it, make sure it's accurate, make sure there's no weird, symbols in there that'll break the flow of events. So I think that's kind of what you're going to show, is that you have all this data and you need to clean it up somehow.
That's exactly it. And I'm going to spend just another minute or two on BigQuery, then move off it, but I just want to show what we'll be looking at. So there's three data sets that are, that are in my data store here. One are the results of a query that I did the join. I brought the two tables together. That was the locations, the sensors with a focus on Florida, Texas, Louisiana, and I threw Ontario in there just as part of the demo, and you'll see how that plays out. And I did it for July through October. So it's really August and September essentially. So that's what's in this results table. And you can kind of look at it, you get the details on it, and you can see that it's about 23,000 rows, about 6.4 megs. Again, this is not a big data problem because I wanted to use kind of data that everyone's familiar with. But when I say serverless, this could be a very large data set that we're looking at. So what I'm showing here would work just as well. And that's the idea of the whole Apache Beam. Once you hit go, it could go off and it'll spawn as many machines as it needs to resolve this problem.
I mean, I think that's the great thing about this pipeline, right? It doesn't matter how big your data is. It can be small or large. You don't need to change anything.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. So, and it's very affordable. And honestly, the scale I'm running, I've been watching my billing, and I don't think I've gone over $5. And I've done this demo several times.
It's okay. They're taking it out of your paycheck, Mike.
They pay too, right? So, all right. So this is the first the results query. and then I did a second query on that to get it down to the, basically the, just the locations that I talked about. So that's what this is. And then the third, and the result of the data cleaning, I'm going to show in the demo how I get here, but because of time, I don't go through the entire cleaning process. You see, this is 23,000 rows. So take a look at this one. It's 154 rows. Wow. And I'll show you how I got there, because I really wanted to focus on the stations. And I did a bunch of concatenations, because the reason these rows, that there were so many rows in the other places, because there's a lot of readings for the same station. So it turns out there's only 154 stations roughly in the area. And what I'm going to show you in the DataPrep demo is how I, clean the data, and this is the result of that, of the data cleaning. So it got down to exactly what I want to do, and then I'll present that in the data studio, and it shows kind of the maps and the graphics. So why don't we jump right into the data prep? So DataPrep is just another another tool on the in the console. Little bit of a tour. You've got flows that are essentially the kind of the workspaces. You've got the data sets, which as implied the data sets, and then the jobs. So I'll start a demo, and then what I'm going to do is jump into one of the existing flows and show you the end result. But let's start with just actually start with a new data set and show how this works. So we can import a data set, and you have a choice to upload it, pull it from cloud storage, or pull it from BigQuery. So, and lo and behold, there's the NOAA data set. And if you recall, this was the results. This was the second query where I narrowed it down to just those states and localities and that time period. So now I'll import this data set. Then DataPrep is smart enough to recognize that there's other names, so it actually throws a new number on there so you don't end up overwriting. And then import the data.
So what we should note here, and I'm not sure if this is obvious to folks, that DataPrep is not actually going to literally import your data set from BigQuery into itself. Mm-hmm. It's simply creating a pointer to the source data.
Exactly. Yep.
So you're not duplicating the data.
You don't have to wait for it to copy the data from one place to another.
Yep. That's exactly right. So you don't have to wait for it. And then also, I think another important point there is you're not affecting your source data. So everything you're seeing here is not, is not going to affect your source data. So you can kind of move with confidence here.
So these flows that you're going to be creating will do some of the manipulation, but you're saying that it won't change the source data. You still have the source.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and I'll show you that right now as we get going here. So this is that source, and then we'll go ahead and add a new recipe. And this is the target data. So it will, again, you notice this was 9, so it's smart enough to say, let's put a 10 on that. If you want to rename it later, you can. And then we'll start to edit the recipe.
There you go.
And editing the recipe, now this is where you really get into the power of DataPrep, because this is where you get the virtual UI, and you can really start to see your data. So kind of a quick tour here. At the top, it talks about the data sets. Because this is relatively small, it's a full data set. If you're dealing with a large data set, you'll typically pull a sample. I think it's roughly, I'm not sure what the size cutoff is, but there is a certain size cutoff. And one of the new releases just out this week that's come out in the beta is the fact that you can actually change the types of samples. So if you're really familiar with data engineering, you want to get different types of samples. You may know enough about your data to be able to either take random or first row or filtered or anomaly based. Cool. So you can use that to pull in different data sets. And again, this goes to that scale point. We're talking about 2,800 rows. So for this demo, not a huge deal, but if you're dealing with a massive data set, the ability to be able to select your samples is really pretty powerful.
Obviously one of the problems you want to really have a clear understanding of when you're starting with data sets is you want to understand things like you have outliers, how is the data distributed, right? So in the example you're showing there, we have, one of the columns looks to be a pretty good kind of normal distribution. So if you're expecting that, obviously this is a good visual confirmation of that. You may have other elements in your data where you do not expect a normal distribution, where you expect, for example, an even distribution. And anytime you see outliers, that could be a cause for a concern, or basically a requirement for you to do something with the data. One of the things you can actually quickly identify here is, what percentage of my data is actually missing. So if I have some number of entries, but half of them are missing, one of the values I care about, like I can figure that out really quickly by using the visualizations.
Yeah, well, a great example. So, when I made the query, there's a lot of data elements that they gather in the NOAA data, but I thought, oh, let's see, thunder and tornadoes, right? Maybe there's some of those. Well, it turns out exactly what you said, Yuri. 0.02% of the data set has thunder. So, exactly what you said right off the bat. Let's just get rid of that. So let's just make that our first recipe entry. So now it looks like we've affected the data, but no one get nervous here, because we really are just building a view into what it will look like when it's done. Similarly, thunder, only 13% of these readings had thunder. So I'm going to go ahead and just make the call that that's not enough for me to really worry about. This is an interesting thing. If you notice, when DataPrep brought things in, it intelligently classified the information. I didn't do this ahead of time. It just brings it in and intelligently classifies it. And it made maybe a wrong call about the observed precipitation. Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't kind of give the tour of these, but because of the way I did the join, you have observation, temperature, wind speed, max wind speed, gusts. So these are really the NOAA elements. So you'll notice that these are decimals, and these are just, it's set as an integer. Well, obviously there's some values that are decimal, so it's easily changed. Now you can see that that is all integer data. Station names, interesting distribution. But to your point, you can see that it looks like the temperature data, yeah, it's got a pretty good curve. So all these stations have a thermometer, right? And they all seem to be reporting that. So that's something we can say about that. All the observations are August and September for months. That's good. My SQL query was right. And it was 2 full months, so my day distribution is about right. A little something funny here, but I could look into that. But because they're days, you'd expect about the equal number of, the same number of days. It's probably got to do with the date that the month ends. But like you said, when you look at things like wind speed, now you're getting into, maybe like gusts, maybe there's something wrong here. Well, it looks like about 51% of the gusts are 999s. So we have a couple choices. We could take that and put it into, you could delete them, you could set them to null values. You get a bunch of different suggestions to go ahead and take care of that. Now, what I want to do, because of time, I'm going to do a couple more things here. Then I'm going to go to a job that I've already run, and we'll open the recipe and go through that in a bit of detail. And then I can show you the actual DataFlow job that ran on that, because it would take me probably 10 minutes to go through and talk about all these things.
I think you gave us a kind of a great intro into some of the initial cleanup capabilities that DataPrep provides. The ability to visualize the data, understand whether it's good, clean data, whether there's outliers, what the distribution looks like, whether there's things missing. Obviously, the next step is, all right, well, what other operations does DataPrep actually allow me to do beyond just the initial cleanup?
Yeah, well, let me show you some of those right here, and make sure I open up the right one. I think it's this one.
Yep. So we're going to try to wrap up in like 10, 15 minutes. So
yeah, no, we should be right on time. Perfect. So yeah, let me go back to the other one. Yeah, we'll be good because I want to show you the the outcome, the data flow that's come out of it, and show you what a fully baked recipe looks like. All right, so here is a a recipe where the one that I'm actually going to show the output from, so you can kind of see some of the detail here. And here it gets to your point. So some of the things you can do here. Well, first of all, the fact that I can go back to something that was done a month ago, open it up, and make modifications is pretty powerful, right? That's what I just did. So I made this transformation. The quarterly or the monthly report went out. Feedback came from the field, and they said we'd really like to see it sliced, left instead of right. I just open up that recipe, and I can go ahead and make those changes. Just that easy. Or I could export it and give it to someone else to use. So that right off the bat, you can see some of the benefit. And looking at the recipe here, we changed the type, we dropped tornadoes. You've seen some of that. Let's see some of the. So something else I've done here to make the presentation. For some reason, NOAA stores lat and lon in separate columns, so I concatenated lat and lon together because that's the way our mapping tools like it. And then I dropped lat and lon, and I did an aggregation, a fairly complex aggregation. And this is where, if you remember, I showed you at the beginning, there's about 155 rows. That's where I came in here with this. I get this thing to show. So in kind of the last step, as I went through with quite a bit of detail and did some sum of the precipitation, I averaged the temperature, I did max on the wind speed, and I mapped it to these different areas. So it was a fairly complicated final aggregation that I wrote off to back to BigQuery as that clean table. So there's some really powerful transformations that you can do. And then when we were all done, back to the Apache Beam, just to kind of wrap this whole thing up. So here's the job. And you can view the results. So you get a quick snip at the results. So you kind of get a sniff test. And if I would have finished out what we were doing, I could have hit run. It depends on the data size, 5-10 minutes to run. You kind of get a look at what it looks like. And then if you want to actually see what the DataFlow job looks like, you're to kind of connect the dots there. This is the actual data, the data, the DataFlow job that actually ran for it. So, and I could dive into that. And
so you have all this data in BigQuery. You imported it into DataPrep. DataPrep, you did some manipulations, averaged, summed it, counted it, and then that was the recipe. From the recipe, you ran a job that actually went through all that data to, I guess, exercise that recipe, and that is done through DataFlow. And
that's exactly it. That's exactly where we are. Yep.
So, Mike, we have a question on the chat that I was hoping you can take a shot at addressing. I think Anthony gave the answer, but I did want to kind of acknowledge it. As well. One of our very astute viewers noticed that the URL for DataPrep is not a Google URL. It's actually on its own domain. And they wanted to understand whether that means that DataPrep is something that we acquired and are working to integrate, or if there's some other reasons why it's not part of the Google domain.
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, we are in collaboration with Trifacta, and people are data engineers. They may be familiar with that product. I'm waiting for the specific details on that. What I understand is they may run in their own project within Google Cloud to operate this, but I do need to confirm that with our product manager. But it's a great question. It is running in DataFlow, so you can certainly see the streams come through. You can't control them if they run off DataPrep, but you could, you can certainly see where they run. So it is a different URL, but I don't think it's going off, into faraway lands and then coming back. But we will definitely confirm that. So.
And I think you made a key point there. That is, even though the domain is a non-Google domain, the infrastructure for it is actually running on GCP.
Exactly. Yeah. And then when the data flows, for some reason, the data flow is not actually coming up. I'd show you that detail. And then there's, quite extensive logging.
So kind of go back to the question I asked at the beginning, right? We've done all our cleanup, we've done the wrangling, we've executed our DataFlow job. The data has now been basically transformed and loaded back into BigQuery.
Yep, there it is.
Show us how you're going to kind of answer the question that we set out to answer, which is, are the events largely around wind or rain?
Yeah, well, sure. So then ultimately, the presentation tool, that it's really freely available to any GCP user. You can point to a whole lot of different sources, is Data Studio. And what this is doing is actually pointing back to BigQuery as a source. And it's the results of that I've kind of cleaned up the table and loaded it in here. And so what you've got here is the total rain was actually higher in Texas, but the wind was higher in Florida. And this is an interactive, map, reaching back into the data set. It's not running queries, so you're not getting charged every time someone uses it. But you can share this. Yuri, I could send you a link right here if we'd like to. You can hook it in, do a webhook, set it up in a website. You can export to sheets. There's a whole number of things you can do with this. So really, this is the kind of going back to the the story about the workflow. It's start to finish. Never a server, never a network to worry about. Kind of all the way back to this. So, and yeah, I mean, we barely scratched the surface. Just kind of in closing out here. There's great documentation for each of the products we've talked about. For DataPrep in particular, our product manager, you can just go to Next 2017 videos for Google Next, and Eric Anderson did a really wonderful job with. He actually joins 3 different tables with consumer data and chat logs and everything. In 30 minutes, he takes you through a really comprehensive demonstration of this. So I would definitely recommend that as a follow-up. And then, of course, all these others there's plenty of documentation on that as well. So.
Mike, I'm going to nitpick at you, but those BigQuery, DataPrep, DataFlow, Data Studio are all supposed to be one word.
Oh man.
Yeah, they are. Yep. They are, and you're right to nitpick. So.
But otherwise, great presentation.
Yeah. Hey, thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Really appreciate it, folks. Out on the line. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch the session. We really appreciate it. We hope this has been useful. Obviously, we'd love for you to go and try this yourselves. There are DataPrep tutorials that are available out there. Try DataPrep, try DataFlow, try BigQuery, and let us know if you have any questions. And Jonathan, what do we have on tap for next week?
I forgot. Oh, we're doing the customer engineer roundtable. That'll be fun, actually. Yeah. We're going to get a carefully curated customer engineer team to talk about what they've seen in the field and talk about all the cool things that we've done over the last year. I think it'll be really interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be Thanksgiving week, so I think we'll talk about all the things we're thankful for, both GCP and otherwise. So we hope you all will tune in.
Yes, and if you like this video, make sure to subscribe, hit like. Mike Ernesto definitely wants to see those likes go up.
That's right. Because anything I know about
Mike, yeah,
he likes those likes.
He does.
Absolutely, I'm living for him.
Anyway, shoot us a note if you have topics that you'd like us to cover. We're open for all different types of suggestions or recommendations. We want to hear from you. This is for you. We're here because we want to tell you about how great Google Cloud Platform is. And I think Yuri's going to close out with some guitar.
Should we play us out? You might want to end broadcast.
All right, I'm going to go on mute here.
There you go.